This is the final footage, filmed by a medic in Gaza, gunned down and killed by Israeli forces on March 23rd, along with more than a dozen of his colleagues. They were on their way to help another emergency crew wounded in an earlier Israeli attack.
يعني أساس طواقمنا كانت رايحة تنقذ سيارة إسعاف هلال أحمر تم استهدافها.
The man who filmed the video was Rifat Radwan. His body was found in a shallow grave. His phone, with the footage detailing the last minutes of his life, was still in his pocket. And that footage has blown up the IDF's initial narrative about the killings. Alongside Rifat's corpse were not only 14 of his colleagues, but also the crushed wreckage of the emergency vehicles they were travelling in.
So many questions we are asking the enemies. Why they were killed? They were wearing negatives. The lights were on.
The world wants answers. What exactly happened here, and will anyone be held accountable?
We have nothing to hide whatsoever.
Using visual evidence, audio analysis, satellite imagery, and our interviews with family members, a survivor, colleagues, doctors, and forensic specialists, we've pieced together a detailed timeline of what happened on the morning of March 23rd. From 3:52 when the first ambulance was dispatched, onto 5:08 when the attack began, and then 7:25 when the last of the communication with first responders was lost. It all builds a clearer picture of the Israeli military's targeting and burial of what was clearly marked emergency vehicles.
إنك رفعت إخواتك كلهم طلعت عليهم وابتسم في وجهي وابتسم في وجههم وطلع. هذا آخر شفتنا لهم وما شاء الله عليه يعني.
Rifat's parents live among the tents of Gaza, one family amongst the hundreds of thousands displaced by the war, now also grieving the loss of their son.
ولا زكي على الله أحد بس رفعت كتير انظلم هو وزملائه لأنه رايح يقدم خدمة إنسانية ما راحش لإشي.
Rifat was a paramedic with the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, or PRCS. He was part of a group of 8 Red Crescent paramedics, 6 first responders from Gaza's civil defence, and 1 UN worker, all on a rescue mission to find a missing ambulance crew that they'd lost contact with. In total, 17 people were involved. None were armed. All their families vehemently denied they were anything other than emergency volunteers. One of the first responders in the group, Asad al-Nusra, is still being held by Israeli authorities without any explanation about why, no charges levelled against him, and no access allowed to him. Munzer Abed, a Red Crescent worker, is the only other survivor. He was released from Israeli detention about 15 hours after the incident. He was in the very first ambulance to come under attack, as he and 2 colleagues were racing to the scene of a bombing in Rafah.
فكانت وظيفتي الأساسية في الكابينة في خلف السيارة. كنت أقعد يعني في الكرسي اللي ورا في سيارة الإسعاف، وكنت مجهز حالي طبعا لابس الجلوفز ومجهز السيارة وأنا أتعامل مع إصابات يعني. بس أنا بقدر أقول لك إنه الفجريات. فصار إطلاق نار كثيف جدا بشكل مباشر علينا على السيارة. وطبعا أنا فترة إطلاق النار انبطحت في السيارة من الخلف. انبطحت جنب الحمالة مباشرة. وما سمعتش من زمايلي نهائيا ولا كلمة ولا أي حرف غير اللي سمعتهم الأنفاس الأخيرة زي ما بقولوا شاقة الموت.
The 2 colleagues he was with were killed, but somehow Munzer survived. He says Israeli soldiers pulled him out of the back of the ambulance, stripped him to his underwear and held him for hours. Before being released, he witnessed soldiers digging a grave and burying the vehicles. Rifat's video is the most significant account of the morning's events. We've picked it up at 4:55, when more Red Crescent workers are dispatched to find out what's happened to Munzer's ambulance crew, which had suddenly broken off contact. We hear the conversation already getting tense.
خنقت يا عمي بالرن على جوالاتهم فيش استهداف. أنا والله حسيت فيها.
After analysing the footage, Sky News has geolocated the exact route the ambulance took. We tracked the team, making its way through the dark, and see about 6 minutes into the video how they drive right past the missing vehicle they've been looking for without spotting it. We brightened the exposure to highlight the white vehicle more clearly. Markings on the van aren't clear from the footage, but we matched the shape, size and model of the vehicle to other emergency vehicles used in Gaza. Further down the road, they meet a colleague in an oncoming emergency vehicle who tells them the ambulance crew they're looking for is behind them.
صالح السيارة ورا؟ يا راجل استنى بدنا نستنى كمان سيارات. هاي سيارة بهلول جاية.
So they turn around and retrace their steps. On the way, they meet up with other crews, also dispatched to find their missing colleagues, and altogether the convoy continues until they reach the white emergency vehicle that's crashed on the side of the road. They stop, get out to investigate. Then at 5:08 in the morning, the shooting begins. The sound of gunfire goes on for more than 5 minutes. We can hear Rifat reciting the Shahada, a Muslim declaration of faith, often uttered in the moments before death.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد تقبلني شهيدا يا الله.
Also among his final words, an apology to his mother.
يما سامحيني يما. هذه هي الطريقة اللي اخترتها يما. إني أساعد الناس. سامحيني يما سامحيني والله ما قلت هذا الطريق إلا لساعد الناس يا رب تب علي يا رب من كذبتني من الشهداء تقبلني.
The attack doesn't end there. Sky News also obtained an audio clip from another paramedic, Ashraf Abu Labda, who was in a different vehicle. This is the first time this audio is being broadcast. Ashraf called the dispatch centre for help at 5:13. In the audio, we can hear the shooting continue, and he appears close enough to see the Israeli troops. At the end of the clip, we were able to make out some Hebrew, suggesting the Israeli forces were much closer than admitted by the Israeli authorities. Only after the emergence of Rifat's footage did the IDF backtrack on their initial narrative, a changing Israeli account which provided a number of mostly implausible explanations. They first claimed a drone operator had spotted the convoy as moving suspiciously, but haven't outlined why. They said the convoy wasn't using headlights or flashing emergency signals, and it had not cleared the route with the Israeli military. The video clearly shows that wasn't the case. All vehicles in the footage do have their lights on. The vehicles are marked with internationally recognised humanitarian signs, and the crews are wearing reflective gear. It seems inconceivable that anyone could not have noticed the convoy lights in the pitch dark of Gaza. A spokesperson for the IDF justified the decision to open fire by saying that the vehicle's movements were not approved in advance by the IDF. But the senior Red Crescent officials told us the area the emergency vehicles were dispatched to was outside the Red Combat Zone at the time, so their mission didn't require any military clearance or coordination. Sky News established that a new evacuation order for the area, shown in yellow here, was only issued at 8:31 a.m. This is the map provided by the IDF themselves, almost 3.5 hours after the attack on Rifat's convoy.
The Israeli military has now admitted to shooting the medical workers, all of whom were unarmed, but they have yet to provide any evidence for their claim that Hamas militants were among those killed. Initially, they said 9 of the rescue workers were militants. About a week later, the IDF revised the number of militants down to 6. But again, they haven't yet provided any information about how they knew that Hamas militants had buried themselves and hidden themselves amongst the paramedics. Sky News has also investigated the social media accounts of all the paramedics involved, and none of them show any obvious affiliation with Hamas. So we asked the Israeli government directly about their claims.
Were they identified as Hamas, these 6 Hamas you've identified? Were they identified before these troops opened fire or after?
So that's why Hamas themselves use ambulances to hide their identity.
Right.
While
So
our
it was
soldiers,
after. So it was after.
No, while our soldiers stake out Hamas terror squads, Hamas hides behind civilians and then cries foul when terrorists are targeted. Mark, Israel doesn't fear the truth. That's why we are investigating this incident extremely thoroughly. Can Hamas say the same? Hamas violates every principle of international law. They hide in hospitals, in mosques, in schools, and then they blame us when war crimes blow up in their own faces.
The IDF has said that their initial investigation showed that there was no firing from close distance during the incident, but our audio analysis paints a starkly different picture.
We worked with independent audio forensic experts to analyse the gunfire in the video. Using the time lag between the sound of the bullet and the gun firing, they were able to calculate that the initial gunshots were fired from approximately 50 metres away. The Israeli military has not said any of their forces came under any return fire. By the end of the recording, the analysis tells us that the gunshots were fired from as close as 12 to 18 metres, which suggests the IDF soldiers were closing in. Altogether, the shooting lasted more than 5 minutes. The audio experts confirmed to Sky News that well over 100 rounds were fired in that time. Doctors who reviewed the dead bodies after the attack told us that some individuals had more than 20 gunshot wounds, many to the upper body and head. Sky News spoke to the forensic pathologist who performed the postmortems on the bodies, and he told us about the injuries he saw.
بالنسبة للإصابات تتراوح ما بين إصابات بأعير نارية وإصابات نتيجة شظايا انفجارية. الأماكن في الرأس، العنق، الجذع أو التورسو، سواء البطن، الظهر، الصدر، البطن، الظهر، وطبعا المفاصل في يعني المرافق والأكتاف.
Using satellite imagery and video analysis, we were able to recreate the scene of the attack. That's allowed us to plot the positions of each emergency vehicle when the attack began at 5:08. The vehicle that first went missing, Rifat's ambulance, and the others that came to help. Satellite imagery taken at 10:48 the same morning shows that within hours, the IDF had gathered 5 of the vehicles together on the side of the road and set up roadblocks to the north and south. At least 9 IDF vehicles are visible in the area, including what looks like tanks and bulldozers. Satellite imagery taken 2 days later, on the 25th of March at 10:36, shows that the vehicles have been buried beneath a mound of sand. This means that they must have been crushed after being moved to the side of the road. This contradicts the IDF's initial claim that the vehicles were damaged by a large engineering tool as they were moving vehicles off the road. And it corroborates what survivor Munza told us about what the military did after the attack.
فكان متبقي بواقي من سيارات الإسعاف عجلين، لأنه إحنا سيارات إسعاف فاتنا طبقوهن كلهن في الكباش.
We arrived at the site where the ambulances were hit.
The IDF also refused to allow rescue teams to access the site of the attack for at least 5 days because of what they called operational activity. When the rescue teams could finally access the area, they were filmed digging mangled vehicles and dead bodies out of sand piles and placing them in white bags to be transferred to the mortuary.
They were here to save lives. Instead, they ended up in a mass grave. Their vehicles, their ambulances, UN vehicles, civil defense vehicles are crushed and dumped, covered in sand next to us. It's an absolute horror. What has happened here?
Amongst the claims Sky News heard from medics and civil defence workers has been that at least one of the bodies had their hands and feet bound together. Photos and videos obtained by Sky News appear to show the recovered bodies, their Red Crescent logo on the arm of the uniform. But there is no clear evidence of handcuffs or legs tied together. Sources at PRCS and Civil Defence told us that these white tags and ties are commonly used by emergency workers to identify bodies.
لكن ما شفناش أدوات ربط، وإن كان في حالة فيها على الرسغ بعض التلونات، على الرسغين في بعض التلونات. قد تفيق بشغلة مثل هاي، لكن فيش عندي دليل دامغ على باقي الحالات بأنه في تقييد. والأمر الملفت للنظر أنه أنا
In the absence of any confirmation from the IDF, it's not clear exactly which of their forces were responsible for the shootings, nor where they were based. But Sky News has uncovered significant clues. Among footage published by the IDF themselves was this photo taken at approximately 6:45 a.m. Sky News located the building to this abandoned hospital. It's just 1 kilometre east of where the vehicles were attacked. And satellite imagery from the hours after the incident shows dozens of vehicle tracks are visible between the two locations. The IDF has not released details of the soldiers or their battalion involved, but it has said they belong to the elite Golani Brigade. This video, which emerged on the 4th of April, shows a Golani patrol commander speaking to his troops. We gave the Israeli military the right to reply, and they sent Sky News this response. The IDF is conducting an inquiry into the incident. The preliminary inquiry indicated that the troops opened fire due to a perceived threat following a previous encounter in the area, and that 6 of the individuals killed in the incident were identified as Hamas terrorists. All the claims raised regarding the incident will be examined in a detailed and thorough manner for a decision on how to handle the event. Serious questions are now being asked in Israel by those at the very highest levels.
The story is more complicated than the original explanation made by the IDF. The original reaction by the Israeli army, then subsequent corrections made, all points to something very, very disturbing.
The amount of evidence already gathered is unprecedented, especially video footage that documents the events. And human rights lawyers say all this points to a grave violation of human rights and war crimes.
This looks like a dreadful war crime. The availability of a bulldozer to bury the bodies of the 15 people and their vehicles, and the change of official accounts given by Israel, all of which points to cover-up. It's exactly what you would expect of any crime. Evidence of crime, and not the reaction of innocence, but the reaction of cover-up.
These scenes have become horrifyingly familiar over the past 18 months. The killing of medics in Israeli attacks has happened repeatedly. Rifat and his colleagues are among more than 400 aid workers who've been killed here since October the 7th. Hundreds of lives violently cut short in a war that the head of the ICRC believes will haunt us for a long time. All of them should have been protected under humanitarian law. Allahu Akbar! What sets their killings apart is their last moments were recorded on video. Now the UN, the EU, their families and colleagues want accountability and justice for their deaths, and answers from Israel about why they were killed. Alex Crawford, Sky News.